Hey guys, how you doing? You alright? Alright, good, good. We need to get the energy levels up in here. Um, this is a weird one for me because I know Basma personally, and I've seen her journey just evolve over the years, and you're a beast, Basma. You are, no, seriously. And you're literally the epitome of a multi-hyphenate creative.
Yeah.
You pretty much do it all. So what I want to do today is create somewhat of a timeline of your journey. I know it's going to be very hard to condense because there's just so much that you've done, but let's try. Let's take it back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay,
God,
cool.
I remember that. Yeah.
So you're a fashion stylist, you've
Yeah.
hosted, you've presented. What was the first thing creatively that, put you on? I can imagine it was the styling, right?
Yeah, so hi everyone, first of all, nice to meet you all, thanks for being here. Yeah, I actually studied fashion business at university. I went to uni in Glasgow. I grew up in Northern Ireland and in Scotland, hence the accent. But I went to university in Glasgow, I studied fashion business. And from there, I don't know if you guys have this when you go to university, they ask you to do placement year. And I decided to do my placement year in New York, which sounds ridiculous, but I worked in a cloakroom of a club and then worked in Urban Outfitters during the day for the entire year to be able to save up to go to New York for the summer to do a placement. I did fashion PR, and I did PR for brands that you might not know now, but things like Jeremy Scott and Mara Hoffman, these incredible brands. And so I lived in New York for a little while, and then I came back. Finished university. Scotland is 3 years if you want. You don't have to do 4 years. And then I did a little bit more fashion PR. And then I was like, I don't like PR. I'm inherently actually a little bit too selfish for PR because it involves a lot of sort of promoting someone else or promoting something else. So I thought I would try styling.
Okay.
And I went into fashion styling. I interned at all the biggest magazines, so Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Elle, InStyle, ES. I did all the magazines. I went from fashion intern to fashion assistant before I went freelance. So
Okay.
yeah, I did all the mags.
Sounds like a lot. Is it fair to say that when you started out, did you know exactly where you wanted to end up? Or was it a case of you just put your hand at something and you kind of flowed with it? Because I feel that in this generation, I don't want to speak for Gen Z. I'm not Gen Z. I'm a bit older than you guys. But it can be somewhat confusing in terms of how to start your creative journey. So was fashion the entry point for you? Or was it something that you kind of just flowed with? Or was this done by intention?
Fashion is what I literally thought I was going to be the biggest fashion stylist in the world. I was like, this is it. This is all I want to be. I want to be a fashion stylist. I want to style celebrities. I want to do red carpets. I want to do magazines. I want to do it all. I had no, it's so funny. When I was at university, I wanted to be a TV presenter, but in my eyes, I said, that's not feasible, but fashion is, which is insane because neither are that easy to do. But I did fashion because I didn't think I could do presenting. I didn't see where that path would be. And the course came up in Glasgow, and I was like, oh, I'll just do this. And then I love fashion, but it was what I thought it would be. I thought I would still be a fashion stylist now. I never thought I wouldn't be.
Okay.
Oh, there I am.
So you started off with fashion. Mm-hmm. As we know, you're director, writer, filmmaker.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing from fashion, you moved more towards television, stuff like that?
I left.
You
left the fashion industry.
You left?
is what
Okay,
I did.
you left fashion.
Yeah, I left.
Any
I always
particular
say,
reason?
I retired from fashion.
Okay.
I would say this was pre-BLM. So I would say that definitely it wasn't a very diverse place to work. Also, it doesn't pay. And I still think magazines do this now. They do 11-month contracts, which means they have no legal rights, really. You don't get sick pay, you don't get holiday pay, you don't get anything. So actually, that suffrages one is so funny because that was probably my biggest fashion moment, just to skip what I was saying.
Okay.
I got the opportunity to assist styling Adele at the Brit Awards the year she won everything. That year she won 6 awards or something. And I was in charge of styling her entire team for their tour, which was black outfits that they had to wear for a world tour, which meant they needed the same outfits. 10 outfits each of the same outfits, so I had to run around the city and find these outfits. And when I look at that, I was so happy in that moment because I was like, wow, this is what fashion is. Yeah. You're working with Adele, she's amazing, this is incredible, whatever. But in reality, I needed to get paid. And so I don't have family in the city, I wasn't living at home. One of the biggest advice I will give you guys is live at home if you can, save up. because honestly, rent will kill you in this city. It still kills me now. So I couldn't afford to be an intern. I couldn't really afford to be an assistant. When I went freelance after I did all the magazines, I did amazing things like this, and I was like, oh my God, I'm at the Brit Awards, this is incredible, but I still got to pay rent.
Definitely. But moving from like fashion, well, you left fashion.
When I left fashion.
According to you. Yeah. And then going into television, I mean, I've got somewhat of a TV background myself.
Yep.
It's no guarantee that you're still going to make a lot of money in television. That's a whole different entity which has its own struggles and difficulties too. Right. So going into TV, were you aware of what some of those hindrances or struggles that you would face going into it? Because it's a completely different industry, and I kind of want you to share with the audience what structural pieces of information you can give them.
Yeah. Also, funnily enough, me and Jason met because we both wanted to be on TV.
Yeah.
Jason wanted to be a presenter, I wanted to be a presenter, and we were both trying to figure it out, and how do you be a presenter. I was actually on a styling job, and I met the agent of like one of the talent. She was like, oh, what do you want to do in the future? I was like, early 20s. And I was like, I really like the idea of being a documentary presenter. And she was like, okay, cool. So like, where's the proof?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she was like, well, how can I tell that you can do this? And so she got my gears thinking of kind of like, okay, I need to actually prove that I can do this. So I actually started off with a YouTube channel, which is still alive. Don't look for it. It's not that great. Where I interviewed black women about being in the fashion industry as a black woman, which was, again, way ahead of its time. So a lot of my peers were like, stop talking about this. This is like not a thing. I did like 8 episodes because there were really like 10 of us. There wasn't really anyone to interview. And that was sort of my proof in the pudding that I wanted to be a presenter, because I think everyone that I kind of met was kind of like, well, cool. Like, this is, again, the beginning of YouTube days. YouTube had just started. I always look at it back now and I think, what if I had stuck to YouTube? I'd be like a big YouTuber now.
ASI.
But exactly.
You never know.
But yeah, I did I don't know if we met during that time, but I had done the YouTube series, and I used that as sort of a way of saying, I can present, look at me presenting. It was straightforward, me interviewing people on my iPhone. It wasn't great. But it was proof in the pudding. And then from there, I actually met someone else who's, again, on set, who said, you should really make a show reel. This was, again, everyone having an iPhone, and I wish that I hadn't spent thousands of pounds, honestly, all my savings. I contacted this company, and they were like, yeah, we'll charge you like 4K, which I could have done on my iPhone, which I didn't know at the time, to make a show reel. I think that is when we met. And then I started looking into how to be a documentary presenter. It's really funny because I think these things as well, going from hosting and then being on the BBC, the BBC was kind of after I'd made the documentary, I sort of started to get called up quite a lot. My first, my first live TV was, I got a phone call from, I guess, like, headhunter at the BBC, and he was like, okay, we need someone to talk about the news that's happened today, the huge news that's happened today. Can you come on? And I was like, what? I just woke up. I was like, what's the huge news that's happened today? And they were like, no, it's really big. Can you talk on this? Do you feel like you can talk on this? So I had like my phone, and like I was on my laptop, and I was like, what is he talking about? And this was the news that Harry and Meghan were engaged.
Big news.
Big news. And I was like, I had never done live TV before. And he was like, we need you to come. And it would be 6 o'clock news, which is like, as we all know, the 6 o'clock news is what everyone tunes into. And he was like, can you do it? And so I was like, can I like phone you back in 5 minutes? So I phoned my kind of semi-agent at the time, and she was like, I don't actually think you should do this because you have no formal training in live TV. This is the biggest news in the country right now. Like, you don't really want to like go into that blind. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting advice. And then I phoned my brother, and he was like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, you're right. He was like, so you mess up, just don't swear. And I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah. Just don't swear. And so I said yes. I said yes because I was with Hugh, I always get them mixed up. Hugh Edwards? Is it Hugh Edwards or Hugh Stevens? Which one around? The Welsh one.
Okay.
Anyone know the Welsh guy? Hugh Edwards? Anyway.
I think they do.
Big presenter. And I said to them I would do it only if they pre-prepared my questions for me. and let me know so I could rehearse them and before going on. So they sent the questions, whatever else. It was like 6 o'clock news. It was like a really, really big deal. And we went on, and then he was like, "Are you ready?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I know all the questions you're going to ask me." And he was like, "Do you?" And I was like, "Yes." And then it was like, "Okay, 3, 2, 1." And then it was like live. And he was talking, and I was like, if he's this is not going where it needs to go. If this was to be real. And then he started asking me the question. I was like, "This isn't the question. I see what he's doing here." And I learned on the spot, live TV, that literally all you have to do at the beginning is give yourself 3 seconds and say anything positive. So he was like, "So Basma, what do you think?" And I just went, "I think Megan is amazing." And that gave me 3.5 seconds to actually come up with the answer. And I kept looking at him being like, "What are you doing?" He did it 4 times. It was a 7-minute segment. I came off, and I remember it was like, "Okay, we're off live, whatever." And I was like, "Why did you do that? Like, we had questions." And he was like, "Sink or swim." And I kind of had a feeling you'd swim anyway.
Yeah. I always say, and I say to people that I speak to sometimes, they go, "Oh, Jason, you've done a few speaking engagements, and aren't you scared? Aren't you nervous?" You thought I was nervous earlier on, but how am I doing?
He was nervous.
Doing okay so far. But I say, listen, even if I am scared, just do it scared. Because if you just don't make any moves or you don't do it at all, you're just never going to know. So that's kind of the philosophy that I take.
Yeah.
But to summarize and go back, thank you, on some of the points that you made when we were speaking about in terms of like, lost my trail of thought now. But to summarize on what you were saying,
I know what you were saying, yeah.
is in terms of advice to give to them,
yeah.
would you say that structurally, to get to where you are, I just want to give them some takeaway moments, like what is the key things that you had to do, because we've jumped quite a bit.
I mean, I think we have jumped quite a bit. I think that really for me, where it was going from fashion PR to fashion styling to live TV to documentaries, which we'll get onto, is that a lot of it, God, we have jumped a bit. There it is, Prince Harry and Mary Meghan. All of it was that I just did a heck of a lot of research. Honestly, I really did the work. I researched every single person that I was like fascinated by. Every documentarian that I was like, "Oh, I really look up to that person," or like I tracked everyone's careers. I literally would make like a list and be like, "This person, this person, this person. How did they get to where they are? And like, how do I get there?" You can't emulate someone's career. You can't do what they're doing, especially as creatives, because everyone's creative eye is different. But what you can do is see the kind of steps that they've taken. And if you mesh all these people together, which was people I looked up to, which was Reggie Yates or Stacey Dooley or Louis Theroux, was that how do you pull the segments of the things they've done in their careers and be able to implement them yourself? I'm going to be really honest, it's not rocket science to be able to do these things, but you have to have a unique selling point. Like everything is about your USP. If there isn't a USP, no one will come to you, because they'll be like, "Well, we could find another 100 people." Like, don't get me wrong, I might have made an incredible documentary, but at the end of the day, even getting another one off the ground, a lot of it was like, "Well, we could get this person to do it. We could get this person to do it. Why would we get you to do it?" And I was like, "But I've already proven I can." And we used to talk about that a lot when we both wanted to be presenters. It was like, "Well, what are you doing that's so original?
Yeah.
That's so different to someone else?" I remember I used to ask you that all the time, and I don't remember what your answer was, but that was always sort of what was drilled into me. What is my USP? What makes me unique from everyone else?
I actually remember that conversation. So Basma was, doing her documentary and her presenting, and that's something initially that I really wanted to get into because I love documentary as well. So I thought, I need to stand out. I need to find my USP, like you guys all, here need to do as well. And I traveled quite a lot of the time.
Yeah, you did.
That was my thing.
Yeah.
And so I thought, let me try to incorporate my travels into the message that I want to give to maybe a commissioner. So I kind of made a documentary series where I was like finding my spiritual path, and I was going like India, Palestine. I've been all around. I interviewed various people in like remote locations around the world. And you put me through to your contact actually over at the BBC. It didn't get commissioned, but it got their attention.
Yeah.
So that's how I found my way. So it's very important that you're saying that. And to pick up on something else that you said, I think it's very important to be, innovative in your thinking, like in terms of how to enter into the industry.
Right.
So I know what my journey is, but we're here to talk about you. What was some of the innovative strategies, if there were any, that you done besides tracking people's careers? Like, were there any specific moves that you made that made people go, okay, we have to pay attention to Basma Khalifa?
Oh, that's a good question. I was undeniably obsessed at the success of this documentary. The documentary took 3 years of no's. 3 years of why you, why now, why, whatever, why, all the time. But I was obsessed. And I was like, I am going to find a way and no one is going to stop me. And it honestly is that level of tenacity. Don't get me wrong, I also had to make money, I also had to live. So I say I left styling and I left fashion, but there was a solid 1.5 year transition between fashion styling and TV, where I had to sort of still make money and still sort of do these commercial jobs. I was doing like John Lewis, Marks and Spencer's, doing campaigns, whatever, which were still fun, but it wasn't as quick sort of like, okay, I did this and then I did this. There was a long slog. Yep. But I really think that it was, I'd almost given myself no option. I'd sort of been like, this is it. This is what I have to do. And I'm even kind of like that now. Like I'm very much like, oh, I've decided I'm going to do this. Yep, well, I'm going to do it. Yeah. And I think that as a creative, you kind of have to have that undeniable, I am going to do this and I'm going to find a way to do this. I had no formal training in fashion styling. I graduated from a business school. No formal training in presenting, in documentary making, in live TV, in nothing. I always say the University of YouTube was my teacher because I didn't know how to do anything. But I was obsessed with learning how to do it. Okay. And I was obsessed with getting there. And honestly, as a creative and as a bunch of creatives in the room, how obsessed are you with the thing that you want to do? And what lengths are you willing to go to do it? And I think that's a big thing to ask yourself. Like, what are you willing to give up? Living in a city like this and how expensive this city is, you have to be willing to not buy that outfit or not go on that night out or not get those trainers or not do that thing in pursuit of your goal. I think a lot of my friends for a lot of my 20s were like, hey, like, come outside your house. And I was like, well, there's rice at home. I'm not coming outside. But I got there. Yep. And that always, I think now I just look at it and be like, I said I was going to do it and I was going to do it. But it was a lot of sacrifice, a lot of sacrifice.
It's interesting you're saying that. I spend a lot of time with creatives from all different walks of life, all different ages. And one of the main things that I notice sometimes is not a full understanding of the timeline of how things, how long things take and how long it takes for you to get from A to B to C to D. And we're in this like attention economy full of like speed and acknowledge me now. So many distractions. Everyone sometimes thinks that an overnight success should happen soon. Yeah. And one of my mentors says that an overnight success is like 10 years of work. So how did you ever deal with the struggle of, I really want to be there, but this is taking too long, and I'm having to really give, a lot of my time and effort to this, not making money, working for free, like all this stuff is just, it's hard grit. So did you ever have those sort of like mental battles, and how did you deal with that?
I literally have it till like this morning. Like that never leaves. Yep. That I want to get to the next stage will never leave, and that is the pursuit of what we're doing, and that is because creativity is endless. And being in creativity, being in advertising, being in film, being in TV, it's an endless pursuit. So there isn't sort of ever a point where I do think about it a lot. I'm sometimes like, God, I wonder if I get this, then will I be like, wow, this is the moment. But now, like nearly in my mid-30s, I'm sort of kind of like at a stage where I'm like, there's no end goal. Yeah. There's just sort of like hurdles. Yeah. And I always said this, people were like, what's the dream? And I was like, there isn't really a dream. There's just like signposts to tick off. So I make up different hurdles that I want to jump after I've finished a hurdle. Or like now I try and plan 2 or 3 years in advance. But there isn't a goal. So I think there will always be the fear. Like I think I live consistently in the fear, but I also think the fear is what drives me. Because I think if you're not fearful of your pursuit, you'll not try and attack it. Like it can't, like, I don't know. It would be really weird if things just came so easy to all of us, because where would that hunger be to get to the next thing? And so I always think I will always stay hungry, and I'll always want more, and we should always all want more for ourselves and for our careers and everything else. But I think for me, staying hungry and staying in the fear has become sort of my norm. I literally every day is some sort of fear. Yeah. Awful thing to say, but it is kind of like what I live in. But I also kind of love it.
Yeah, I hear you. I want to do a quick show of hands to the audience. How many of you want to work in film, television, making documentaries within that kind of space?
Oh, nice. A few people.
Okay, there's a few
Love that.
people. But I can imagine most of you want to end up somewhere in a creative space. So I kind of want to help them in some kind of way where we go from like idea to the whole sort of like ideation phase to like execution. You had to do that to get this.
The documentary.
This,
The moment.
to get this commissioned and signed off. And there's a vigorous process where you take something from here to there. So briefly, if you can, I see the anxiety on your face. What are some of those crucial stages to get this into real life?
Where do you start? What are the crucial stages to get this to life? We were kind of like, we'd met around the time that this was sort of kicking off. And I remember so much of that time was about like obsessive patience, if that makes sense. There had to be a through line to be like, eventually this is going to pull off. Eventually we're going to get there. So the practicalities of this documentary of mine, which ended up blowing up and did amazing things, and I'm super, super grateful, is that after I sort of had done the YouTube, I'd made the YouTube, I then spent thousands of pounds on the show reel. I was like, okay, well, how do you do this? I used to go to a lot of these things, which is also, can I say, well done, and you should always give yourself a pat on the back for coming to these things, because that's where I learned everything I had to learn, was from coming to these kind of talks and going to panels and doing all these things. And I remember I went to one and they were like, well, you can't just like pitch to the BBC. That's not how this works. And I was like, oh, how does it work? And they were like, you have to find a production company and they pitch. And I was like, that's weird. Why would I do that? And they were like, because you can't pitch yourself. Which is still the thing, by the way, in TV. Yeah. And I was like, but I'm me. How can I not? And they were like, toe the line. I was like, okay, fine. I need to find some production companies. So I spent a solid few months watching every documentary I could find, every single person I was into, and I would write down the entire credit list of every single person at the end. That is, for anyone who wants to be in TV and film, literally gold. That is where all the gold is, the credit list at the end, because that's all the names of everyone who's making all the stuff, right? So I would write down every exec, every commissioner, every production company, everyone, and then I would just like hound them all.
Oh God!
I literally would just
calling them all.
I would cold call, I would cold email, I would cold LinkedIn. I always say this, and I feel like LinkedIn should start paying me. I am obsessed with LinkedIn, and everyone should be on LinkedIn, and I owe my career to LinkedIn, and I should stop talking about LinkedIn because I want money from them. But LinkedIn is how I ended up with this documentary, really. I found the production company, and I found the guy who ran it, Mickey, and I DM'd him on LinkedIn. And I DM'd like 100 people, but he just happened to be one of the people that replied. And I was like, I have a documentary idea that I'd love to tell you about. And he just replied straight away, and he was like, can you come in tomorrow? I called in sick to my job the next day, and I was like, yeah, I'm 100% can come in tomorrow. And I went and I sat and I talked to him, and I was like, oh, I want to do fashion. Like, I'm really interested in fashion, like a fashion documentary. And he was like, yeah, cool. No one really cares about that. What else can we do? And he was like, well, tell me your story. And I was like, well, I was born in Saudi Arabia, but I'm from Sudan, blah, 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 blah. And he was like, cool. So when was this time you went to Saudi? And I was like, no, I don't really want to go there. I was like, it's not really my cup of tea. And he was like, but when was the last time? And I was like, oh, like 25 years ago. And he was like, do you see what I see? And I was like, that you're going to want me to go to Saudi and I don't want to go there? And he was like, there is no way to make a documentary in this day and age if you're not talking about your story first. Mm. That's your USP, is your personal story. That's what makes you, this is your story. You haven't been back to your birth country. It's not obviously where your heritage is, but it's where you were born, and you haven't been back there. And I was like, yeah, but that is complicated. I don't want to do that. And he was like, well, think about it, but that would probably be the idea. That's the idea I would pitch if I were doing this with you. So go away and think about it, but I think we should pitch that. And I was like, I don't think Saudi will let us in. Like, will let us film a documentary. And he was like, well, you don't know till you try. And I was like, yeah, that's, I guess, true. Anyway, he then wanted to make another show reel. We made a sizzle, as you call it, of like 30 seconds of me sort of on camera talking about my story. And then we did a pitch deck. By we, they kind of made a pitch deck. I didn't know what that was. So they sort of did that whole thing. And then we just started pitching. He'd done quite a lot of Stacey Dooley's documentaries. So he had a through line with the BBC. And they said no. And then they said no, and they said no, and they said no, and they said no for about 2.5 years. And then eventually I came to one of these things because I knew the commissioner that had kept saying no. And he was, I don't recommend doing this, by the way, because he told me afterwards to be like, you shouldn't really do that. But I cornered him at the end of the talk. He was out doing a talk, and I managed to get on be like one of you guys in the crowd. And I cornered him at the end, and I was like, I just wanted to say, like, my documentary is stuck, and I'd really love you to take a look at it. And he was like, wow. He was like, we get 700 documentary ideas a month. I don't know which one yours is. And I was like, but if I get Mickey, who I know you love, to watch it, and can you read it? And he was like, fine, I'll get him to. So tell him you met me here. I've really got to go. It was a 20-second exchange. And I phoned Mickey, went outside, phoned Mickey and said, send him it. And he was like, Basma, this is not how this works. You can't just corner commissioners at events. And I was like, but you can. He was like, I'll send it now, but I don't think this is the way this is going to work. He sent it, and we got a green light 5 days later.
Wow.
Ridiculous.
So it's fair to say that your harassment worked.
The harassment worked.
Yeah, it worked. Well done. Let's play the trailer.
My name is Basma. I work as a fashion stylist in London. I grew up in Northern Ireland, but I was born in Saudi Arabia. My aunts have been begging me to come back to Saudi Arabia in the hope I might be convinced to move there. I've decided to spend 2 weeks with them to see what my life would be like in Saudi. But this journey is going to prove much more challenging than I imagined.
Are you uncomfortable, or is it the rules?
Going out like this without abaya is completely wrong.
Happy? I just feel like we're going to get in trouble. I honestly don't get it. This is crazy. Like, I literally was just reading an article.
They are really, really angry.
Okay. We didn't do anything that bad. I got chucked out after 6 days of being in Saudi Arabia. That's what made that documentary what it was. I was meant to be there for 2 weeks. It took us 3 years to get it off the ground, and they revoked my filming after 6 days. So I came back to London and was like, that's it, ruined my one chance at making a documentary. It's all over. Left London for a little while to sort of like cry my tears of I've ruined this whole thing. And actually we had filmed so much because I had no experience being on TV. So we just kept the camera rolling 24/7 that we had enough for a feature-length documentary, which is incredible. It aired in...
A long time ago.
A long time ago, 4 years ago now. It went from BBC One to BBC Three. It was syndicated worldwide, 10 million views. I became Edinburgh Festival's Newcomer of the Year. It was amazing. It was an amazing time.
Yeah.
How did you feel about me making a documentary and you not making a documentary?
Yeah, because I didn't get that love from... I didn't get like the come into my office the day after and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to your point earlier on. Like, it took you 2 years to get there.
Yeah.
And likewise with other things, I have created ideas and pilots, and I've got loads of no's, but then I have had certain things being bought and taken off me.
Yeah.
How I deal with no's and rejections is I just keep going. I try. It's very difficult, but I don't take it personally. I just have a ton of vision and I just go for it. But I ended up here hosting this.
Which is quite cool,
D&AD.
actually.
I appreciate it. So everyone has their own path. Everyone has their own lane, and it's just a process.
Yeah.
But, what I want to know about you, because it's all about being multi-layered, multifaceted, faceted and disciplined, is how on earth do you manage your time? Because you're like a director, you've been a stylist, you've done things for Black Panther, like your credit list is absolutely insane. I'm sure your diary is as well.
Yeah.
So how do you structurally manage that time, and how do you do everything to kind of like go to the next step and go to the next level?
I actually wish you hadn't asked me this question, because I wish I was better at this. Like, I suck at that. I wish that I had a structure. I literally said to Jason today, he was like, why don't you come early and you'll walk around? And I was like, oh no, I have to do a full shoot before this.
Yep.
And I have a whole camera bag with me because I was doing a shoot in Clapton, and had to spin out of the shoot really early. I was like, I've got to run, I've got to go. Couldn't get an Uber, cycled here in the rain, came huffing and puffing and soaking wet, and was like, but I then need to be on this panel. And then actually I've got a call at 3 o'clock, so I need to get home for the call about this next documentary idea. It's so sporadic that there's no real sanity. What I'm learning now from my sort of co-founder of my business is that I try to do too much at the same time. I'm not very good at doing one thing and then being like, okay, I finished this thing. So she's an author, so she writes books, so she's very good at being like, okay, I'm just gonna do this one thing and I'm gonna do it non-stop for 3 months. And I'm like, well, that sounds really boring. I have no 2 days that are the same. But I think that I've learned to just be a really good juggler. Doesn't mean I don't drop the ball sometimes, but most of the time I think that all the projects that I'm doing, I have so much passion for each project that I'm able to juggle them because I'm able to give myself to all of them. It does mean at times, so for instance, I'm writing a TV series and it's amazing, but like I got feedback from that 3 weeks ago and I still haven't touched it since. So I sort of lead by gut, which is a lot of like, okay, there's things that urgently need to happen. I urgently need to be on this shoot. I urgently need to do a panel talk. But things that are like longevity projects, that are 2-3 year projects, I will pick them up when it feels right to do that part of the creativity. I think when you're multi-hyphenate, sometimes I don't want to write. And sometimes I don't want to present. And sometimes I don't want to direct. So you really sort of have to lead by the personal projects that you're doing, except for obviously the things that you get paid to do. When it's a personal project, you kind of have to do it at the time that feels right for your gut to do it, because otherwise you won't be able to give your best to it, if that makes sense.
Makes sense, makes sense.
But it doesn't mean I'm organized, and I would love to be better organized.
I got a PA for you.
Yeah.
No, but would you say that being a multi-hyphenate creative, do you think that's the way forwards? Because traditionally it was like, I want to be a director, I want to be a producer, and it was like a real linear pathway to, you know, securing that ultimate goal. But now I'm finding that the climate is very different. Like there are people that are videographers, photographers, and so on and so forth. Do you think that is a generational thing, or do you think it's better to be this way? Does it open up more doors and opportunities, or is it a case of, you know, you're jack of all trades, master of none? What do you think?
Or master of all. I think that the reason I became multi-hyphenate as a thing, which I didn't really know was a thing until people started calling me it, I was like, oh, is this a thing where you just can do lots of different things? Yep. I don't think there's a creative that only does one thing. Like, I would love to know if there's one creative in here who literally is just this one thing and doesn't have, like, an interest in another creative field. Like, even if you don't do it, I'd be surprised if there isn't a graphic designer that's maybe also interested in animation, or a documentarian who's also probably interested in advertising. Or, like, I don't think creatives are meant to be in a box. I don't think it works. So I think that a lot of what I'm doing, one of it is also survival, to be perfectly honest. I spread myself out when I'm like, oh, this section isn't really working. So if this documentary took 2.5 years to get off the ground, I had to do something in that time to pay rent and to live. So a lot of that was like, okay, well, I'm doing this thing now. Okay, well, actually, I really like writing. Why don't I start writing features? Oh, I'll pitch some ideas to Elle or to Vogue. And, oh, actually weird. They're saying yes to this. Let me do more of this. But I don't think that any creative is really boxed into being able to do one thing for their entire career. Even if you're a director, you go from directing adverts to directing TV series to maybe directing film to maybe, like, you do jump. Like, and that is how careers progress, right? And, like, you're a perfect example of that. Like, you went from TV and now you're in advertising. Like, I went from styling to documentaries and now I'm director. I don't really front face docs anymore. But I think that's just the journey. Yeah. So I would say as a creative, don't feel like, oh, I picked this lane, now I have to stick to it. Because I think the joy in our minds as creatives is being able to be like, okay, what else can I dabble in? What else, like, am I interested in? If you've got the time, especially as young people, like, you've got the time now to sort of dabble, I would take the dabbling time. Because once you get into your 30s and whatever else, you sort of like your responsibilities start rolling in. You start thinking about mortgages and wanting to buy a house and all these things. But your 20s is really that time to be like, let me just keep dabbling until something sort of lands. Do I think now at my age it's landed? No. Like, up until Monday, I was a shadow director on a huge set for an Apple TV program, because in my head I was like, oh, I'm still a student. Like, I don't know how to direct TV, but I would love to know. So let me go and shadow a director and find out like what is involved in doing TV, which I sat there the whole time being like, oh, this is amazing, but also really boring, but kind of amazing. Like, it's really interesting to sort of still always be a student. I never want to stop being a student. I think that's the biggest joy in being creative, is to stay being a student and stay learning and stay progressing in that part that you want to do, and eventually something will land. I think that eventually it'll land.
It will.
But do I think now that this is 100% where I'm going to be? Don't know. Is that a worry? Do I care? Not really. I'm kind of enjoying the journey. Do you feel like it's landed for you?
Not at all.
Yeah, there you go.
No. And I'm 36, guys, and it hasn't landed. So it happens when it happens. I believe in the journey. Before I open up the floor to questions, what's next for you? And what are some of your final thoughts? I've tried to like click it. Oh, there we go.
Hey.
So what's next for you? What's in the pipeline? And what are some of your final thoughts to share?
So I have just finished shooting a feature-length documentary. This is another thing, guys, if you are documentarians or in TV or know how to use camera equipment because you care about that part of the world. I applied for a grant and I got, again, we have a lot of grants in this country, amazing grants in this country. Actually, that's one thing we have a lot of. Look up grants, apply for grants if you're interested in making TV, film, or want equipment. There's a bunch of them. I applied for a grant and I got given a bit of money, and I spent the rest of the money and I bought a camera. And I got approached about making a documentary. I had left this camera in its bag for 2 years because I was scared of it. I didn't know what to do with it. I was like, oh, this is fancy. I don't know what to do with this. And then someone came to me, who's now my co-founder of my business, was like, hey, I've got this documentary idea in Egypt. Do you want to film it? And I was like, yeah. Sure. I went to University of YouTube again and just learned how to use this camera, which to this day I still don't know how to use properly. And I just finished shooting the feature-length doc. It's now in post-production in LA, which is amazing. Our exec producer lives in LA, so we're going to do the feature of that, which is exciting. Hopefully that will go into festivals at the end of this year. Just finished writing a TV series. Never written a TV series before. Just launched an entire studio. Don't know really how to run a studio, but we're going to figure that out as well.
YouTube again.
Yeah, YouTube again. But it's exciting. I think at this stage in my career, it's about doing the big projects that will pay off bigger. I think eventually you get to a stage in your career where you're like, okay, this little bit, this little bit, this little bit, it's fun, it's great, oh, big money here, big money there, great. But eventually you'll want to pour into something that will take a bit longer. I always said this documentary at the beginning, I was like, guys, if we start this journey, it's a 3-year journey. And they were like, there's no way this will take 3 years. And I was like, we're now into year 3 and we still don't have an ending. So I'm going to have to like figure out an ending before the end of this year. But that's how long it takes to make a documentary realistically. My one was amazing because it was a zeitgeist at the moment. But most documentaries take that long. So I would say that as you get older, you'll want to do some of the big ones. So if you're young now and you can think of an idea or something that you love, start thinking about it and start tickling away at it, because eventually you'll sort of do it and it'll pay off in the future. I think I wish I'd started the big projects earlier, but I was so obsessed about the next thing that I didn't think about the big thing. But you live and you learn. So I'm excited.
Okay. Do you have any final words for our audience? Words of encouragement?
No, I'd love some questions.
All right.
Do you have any final words?
Do I?
Yeah. Can I have some of yours?
Oh, wow. You're interviewing me now?
Yeah.
I would say create in the way that you want to be received and create things. Let's say, for example, you have an idea. This is what I do. If I want to end up at a specific company or I want something to be commissioned on this television, I create in that way. So yeah, like I used to do some weird things, like I would write MTV on my CV and never send it out. Yeah. But subconsciously, not that I'm into all that kind of stuff, but sometimes it works, I would start to look in that direction for things and then it would come my way. So create the stuff that you want to be associated and recognized with. So if you want to create a pilot and you want to start going into like the kind of documentaries that you've done, get your camera, go on YouTube, you got your phone, we all have access to technology. You don't need to wait for the opportunity to come to you. You literally can just grasp it and go and get it yourself. So that's what I would say.
That's great advice.
That's what I say. Create in the way that you want to go and be perceived.
That's my advice too.
You can use it. Does anyone have any questions at all?
There's no way.
There's one at the back.
I love a question.
Hi. Hey. So I was just wondering, with your doc that came out, Inside the Real Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
by the sounds of it, you had no intention of going back to Saudi Arabia, and that was like the influence of the production company.
Yeah.
So out of interest, what did you go in to pitch that day? Was it just that you wanted some kind of involvement in like a gonzo piece, or did you have a different idea?
I had different ideas. I went in because the trailer I'd made when I spent that money making the show reel was based around being like in fashion and fashion around the world and different types of fashion around the world and the history of fashion, because that was all I knew really was fashion. So I went in with that idea. Now looking back on it, it was never the right idea to pitch, so I'm really surprised that he said yes to meeting me, but I think he just took a hunch and was just like, oh, like, sure, we've got a spare hour. But what I did learn from that when he sort of pitched back to me was, even though I didn't really want to do it and I was really scared about doing it, was that I needed to trust him as the professional, that he was like, if you allow this to happen, we can get this made eventually. And so I put aside, you have to make a decision, right? You put aside your idea versus progressing in your career or being obsessed with your idea and then kind of not getting it anywhere. So I'm really glad that I would always say to you guys, like, listen to the person who knows what they're talking about. Like, trust those people who've made the work that you want to make. And I trusted him, and yeah, it worked out.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else, or is that it? Okay, cool.
I do also have to say, by the way, the Louis Theroux thing I think is really important to mention. I know it's back a few slides, but we talked about this outside, about the mentorship thing.
So Louis is essentially your mentor, Louis Theroux.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Yeah, so... Yeah, is he? Yeah, so I do think we talked about this outside because we were talking about the value of mentorship and what is their value in mentorship and what does that look like, and we always have people we look up to and whatever else. I personally, I mean, Reggie Yates was kind of my mentor and is now a close friend, but I wouldn't become obsessed with that idea of having someone tell you how to do things. Louis was amazing. We were in a placement actually with the BBC, with BBC Talent Works, who you guys should all look into if you're into TV, who are amazing. But they put me with him for like 6 months, and as much as he's incredible and I learned a lot from him, we have different styles of documentaries. He does a lot of his in America, and a lot of his company do things about darts and snooker and sport. And I was like, oh, I want to talk about like Afghan girls not learning, or like the war, or like, and so we had very different viewpoints. So even though I admire him and admire what he does, it's also okay to admire from afar. Like, I love that I know him and that if I got to meet someone that I idolize. But I do think we idolize the idea of mentors, and I wouldn't actually say at this point in my career I even have one. I would love to have that, but I do think that like the most learning I've done has actually been from my peers. A lot of things where I don't know how my camera works, or if I think this shot works, or if I like this edit, I will send it to my friends who are in the same career as me and be like, what do you guys think? Do you think this can be better? I'm stuck here. How do you think? So I would always endeavor and ask you guys to always look at the person sitting next to you or around you, or the people that you're learning with and growing with, because they will be the people that will ride with you and will learn from you and you'll learn from them. A lot of this sort of like seeing someone higher and then trying to emulate them, I don't think actually is the best learning I've done. The best learning I've done has been from my peers. So definitely look at the people next to you. I definitely over hire.
Fair point. Before one question at the front. Does anyone have a Roman mic? Shall I step that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would be good for everyone else to hear you in the room as well.
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much. There was a lot of amazing advice. But I'm curious. So you said you're a multi-hyphenate who's doing too much.
Yeah.
And
I did say
you became really good at juggling. And that's your way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
But for someone who's a bit more early on, with less experience, but equally curious minds, do you have any advice that's a bit more tangible?
Don't do too much. I might say that I do a lot now, but like I've also been in the industry for like 15 years. It's not... Like, I started off just doing fashion, and then I left fashion. There was a transition period, but I left, and then I was just making documentaries. While I was making docs, I kind of was like, oh, let me try writing features. I love the idea of writing for The Guardian one day, or writing for The Telegraph. Okay, this is like something that I'm interested in doing. I didn't try and do everything at the same time. Like, there's no way you can start 5 careers at the same time. It's more the case of like, I just sort of did this thing, and it sort of went into this thing, then went into this thing, and yes, I could go to a styling job tomorrow if I wanted to. Would I be the best? Probably not. because there's better stylists out there who've been in the game for longer and have learned all the tips and tricks and the newest trends and the newest things. So I definitely, as much as it's a juggle, I think writing, directing, filmmaking, presenting is a juggle. I wouldn't try and do everything at the same time. Stay curious, 100%, but don't try and be the jack of all trades from day one. Stick at something, figure it out. If you're like, this doesn't sit with me, let me try something else. Don't be like, here's 5 things, I'm going to do them all at the same time. That would be my advice.
Thank you very much.
No
So
problem.
prioritize and start in one place.
Prioritize.
Yeah.
Prioritize. Start. Like, I would literally sit. You know what I do all the time? I mind map. All the time. Every 6 months, I will mind map my career and be like, okay, here's this point, this point, this point. Mind map them out and be like, what's the priority? On those little lines of the mind map, I'll write the time that I think it will take to get there, the realistic time. And then I will do that at the top of the year. I then do it in June. I then do it again kind of in the autumn. And then I'll do it in December for the new year. So mind map out your interests, or if you're not a mind mapper, column them out, and then decide which one takes priority. They cannot take priority all at the same time. It's virtually impossible. I maybe juggle 2, maybe 2.5 things at the same time.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
I kind of want to layer on to your point to maybe see if I can give you some more advice as well. It's what I started to do when I first started out, is sensibly have a proper timeline that's just not too extensive, because the goal is to get yourself seen and to get your work seen. So like I started to create like these mini projects where I'd be like, well, this would take maybe 2 weeks to complete, and then maybe I can gradually move on to the next idea that may take around the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So before I knew it, let's say hypothetically it was YouTube or portfolio that you're creating, within 6 months I may have 5 things on there. So then I could leverage that and start going to the market and saying, hey, you know, this is me, I'm Jason Chin, look at my work. If you have these grandiose ideas and you're mixing it with all these other little micro projects, you're going to get lost in that. So maybe just, you know, be a bit pragmatic about how you're doing it. So that's just my advice.
Great advice. Yeah, I love that.
Any other questions? Oh, we got 2, one at the front, one at the back. And one over there.
One of my questions was, what are some pieces of work that you find particularly inspiring to you as a documentarist?
Ooh, you want me to take some people down? That's so interesting. What pieces of work did I not find inspiring? Things I'm just not interested in. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I was saying about the Louis Theroux thing, right? Like, they make amazing documentaries, but I don't care about darts. I don't care about snooker. I don't care about golf. It's just not of interest. So rather than it's documentaries per se that I'm like, I don't like this, I would say that I think there's value in watching things that you don't like so that you know you don't like them. So never just watch the things you like. Expand your sort of understanding of creativity to know that, like, I'm not a big sci-fi girl, but I'll watch it to sort of be like, oh, I see how they got here. Yeah, it's not my thing, but I see how they got here. So I would definitely say watch things that you don't like. But for me, there's a bunch of stuff that when it comes to sport that I don't love, but then I'll watch like the Formula One on Netflix because I think it's really good storytelling, or like the tennis thing that they do that I think is really good storytelling. So it's more subject-based, I guess, than documentaries. I don't like how they're shot because documentaries are hard to shoot, and it is a lot dependent on access, it's a lot depending on the country, there's a lot depending on the people you're talking to. So when I've watched one and been like, oh, I wonder why they did that, now I know, having had the experience, that sometimes that's just like the way the cookie crumbles when you're on set. It doesn't always work out. So I try not to be critical of docs.
Okay. I don't know how we are for time, but are we okay?
Okay.
Is there any more questions? And then we can finish. So there's one at the front, and then there's one at the back.
And there was one back there as well.
Hi.
I'll do them quickly. Oh. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for the talk. My question was, I think as soon as, especially like, because most of us here are students, once we kind of emerge into the industry, so I've been working in and out of the industry and freelance a lot, I feel like the more you do for other people, the more you do for money, the more you lose your own creative style or your own creative endeavors. So I guess the question is, do you still have time? Do you still make time in your days to work on your own things that are not being commissioned or pulled by other people?
Look at the way we're just both looking at each other like...
It's all you.
Yep. It's interesting. I mean, Jason's obviously in a full-time job now, and I think it's a really interesting question actually for you to answer. From my point of view, I would say that it's a constant struggle, I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of doing work that you wouldn't necessarily want to do, but you need to pay the bills. But that's why I do the bigger projects that are mine. Like my documentary that I've shot, like I adore, and I could talk about it for days, and I could keep working on it. And because I have this big thing that's mine that I love, all these little things that I need to do to make money, it's fine. It'll get there. And you also have to have the belief that like eventually this thing that I'm making here will make me money, that I won't need to do these little things. But unfortunately, that's kind of like the law of the land, right? You kind of just have to do those things, but stay true to yourself and stay true to your creativity. And also, don't beat yourself up. If there's like 4 or 5 months of the year that you have to get your head down and just do work that you don't want to do, but you need to pay your bills, do it. Like, creativity isn't going anywhere. The industry isn't going anywhere. Things, yes, they're always like, oh my God, things are changing so much, but they're not. They will just continue changing. So I definitely would say, like, don't be hard on yourself for choosing to, like, prioritize your livelihood. Because if you're not taking care of your bank or taking care of your family or taking care of yourself, you won't create well anyway.
Yeah.
What about you, Jason?
I mean,
as someone who's got a full-time job now.
No. I love my full-time job. I love the team. I love everyone. So I'm very blessed to have a full-time job that I absolutely love. I haven't sacrificed my, my grand passion projects or whatever. But what I will say is this. Sometimes people, especially nowadays, I've noticed a lot of people are like 9 to 5. If you get a creative 9 to 5, depending upon what that is, I didn't get the documentary commissioned the way Basma did, but my 9 to 5 took me through a real educational process where I know how to write proposals, I know how to pitch, I know how to cost things, I know how to get the concept from idea to the whole development phase to execution, I know how to get a hold of stakeholders, I know how to get a team and manage that team and oversee that team and execute. So my journey has done something else, but in the end, who's to not say that it's not going to ultimately take me to my final destination, and I needed to go through that journey to get to that moment where maybe one day I'm pitching the biggest project of my life, and if I didn't go through the journey that way, I wouldn't be able to do that and have full mastery over my work. So what I will say is be optimistic. Sometimes things happen to us by default, but it really is for a reason. So don't frown upon any conventional route of making money or doing a 9 to 5. What I will say is, if you're not doing your passion project and it's not funding you, try to find a job that pays you within this creative sector and learn from people that are more experienced and experts in what they're doing, because it will fuel your end goal. So that's what I would say.
I really want your skills.
Sorry?
I'm jealous that you have those skills. Because those are skills that's the thing, because he's worked in-house somewhere, right? So he has skills that, like, someone being freelance, I don't have. And that I probably need, right? To be able to get the big jobs and to be able to pitch well. Yeah. So it's really interesting that, like, Jason probably looks at me and is a bit like, oh, you got the documentary and you are directing. And I look at him being like, I need your skills so I can make some money. So it's really interesting that, like, what you get out of both things and how they can benefit you in the future, I'd say.
Any more questions and then we'll wrap up?
There's two, one there and one back.
Two.
How's it going, Basma? Thank you very much for hosting or sitting part of the panel and giving us your experience. I'm sort of new to this sort of setting here. Traditionally, I probably stand out from everyone here. Probably got the longest beard here as well. It's my first time coming to an event like this, and I've come with two sort of lenses. One is from a creative space, but the other one is from a perspective of looking for people like myself in this sort of space, which I think is quite few. I lead an Islamic center, which was sort of rebranding as a community development project, where there's a lot of creativity involved in it. It's almost tradition and contemporary sort of feel, young and old sort of thing. So I feel like there's a lot that we can offer as value. But what I find when I look for people like myself who traditionally more orthodox Muslims within a space, it's often something that we don't, in a space that we don't enter. And I'm trying to figure out why that is. So I'm looking for more Muslims in it. I find what's celebrated more is the people who leave their traditional values and express themselves, which is perfectly fine. But I'm saying what we end up doing is we tend to marginalize the people that are still within the space. So I'm on this journey of trying to find or open up the space to bring creativity to the orthodox sort of position, and I'm finding less representation of it, and I actually want to sort of break the barriers within that. Meaning, I think there's a lot that we can offer as value the language that you speak, born and raised in the West, traditional values, and there's an audience that we can reach. I chair and direct an organization that sees about 350,000 people coming. We're doing phenomenal things with design and bringing it into the Islamic sort of space. So I guess I got 1,000 questions for you. I would love to have a conversation with you one day. But the two questions one would be more on advice, and another one question is, what role does faith play in your journey? And the second one is advice for someone like myself who probably is trying to take on it, not so much expressing freedom as such, it's finding freedom within this.
Got you.
Yes, okay.
Got you. So for anyone who didn't hear that, I guess the end question is, what role does faith play in the journey and in finding your journey through also mindful of your faith? I mean, I'm a Muslim, black, female, so I sit under 3 banners of discriminatory groups and the struggle of getting through whether I'm a black woman, whether I'm a woman, whether I'm Muslim. So it's 3 different things I have to battle through to get through, but I got there. And I do think that, like, for me, it's holding, whether you're faithful, whether you're religious, whether you have any sort of belief system, any spiritual belief system, is that holding that true to yourself. You should be able to lead with that. There are definitely times when I do things and I'm like, should I do that? Is that going to piss off a family member? Is that going to, like, don't get me wrong, getting thrown out of Saudi Arabia pissed off a lot of family members. It wasn't that easy. I do definitely think there are things that you will have to sacrifice if you're choosing to be front-facing. I chose to be front-facing, so there are things that I do that, yes, might be compromising for some people, but I always try to stay true to my essence of who I am and what I believe and my core belief system. So I definitely think it's a challenge. I definitely think staying true to faith is a challenge, but I think everyone's interpretation of religion, spirituality, faith is different. How someone is not how another person is. So if you can stay true to who you are and the people that you respect, as long as you don't upset them because you respect them, then I think you can carry yourself through. But if in your gut says don't do it, don't do it. That would be my... What's your... any thoughts on that?
Okay. I'm a black man, as you can tell, and I'm somewhat of a man of faith myself, but over the years, I'm sure I'm a bit older than you, what I decided to not do, and it doesn't mean I'm less of these things, is I don't lead with me belonging to quote-unquote subordinate groups. I'm a creative, I work hard, and I possess those ethics. And it's as simple as this. If something doesn't fall in line with what I believe in or what I want to represent, I just don't do it.
Yeah.
So sometimes my inactivity or my response to not doing something is the answer, as opposed to projecting, saying, well, I am this Jamaican man and I believe in this concept. Because you have to be careful that you, regardless of faith, religion, and race, it could be anything. You know, this is still an industry and there's still somewhat of a game and a dance to play. So before doors are shut in your face, you have to be a bit more embracive. And in whatever doesn't fancy or float your boat, you just say no. Sometimes it's just as simple as that. That's just my opinion. Yeah. We can talk afterwards. Should
we let the girl who...
Is there another question?
That was the last one. Yeah, she had her hand up for ages. We'll do this really quickly and then we'll wrap up. I feel bad.
And then that could be the last question.
Hi, thank you for fighting for me.
No worries.
My name is Nicole, and the question I have for you today is, I feel like as a young creative, everybody wants to know, you know, what steps you take to get where you are, but I sort of want to ask like the opposite of that. Have you ever made a misstep in your career that you wish you'd done differently, or maybe, you know, some red flags within the creative industry that you'd like to warn everyone about?
Ooh, red flags. The fashion industry was really hard. It was really hard to be in fashion, let alone that I was a black woman. I also was like not a skinny black woman. So it was really hard to be in an industry which is literally based on how you look. I didn't know the gauntlet and the fire of that would be, and I didn't know how little my voice would matter and how I looked would matter the most. It might be different now, I don't know, I don't work in the magazines, but at the time it was pretty brutal. Had I have known, would I have done it? I probably would have still done it because I was young and just wanted the experience. In film and TV, I think making my documentary was amazing, but I then went into pitching because they were like, we'd love for you to make a series, and nothing pulled off. Because every single time I pitched something, they were like, we could get Stacey Dooley to do that. And I was like, well, I don't know how to get around this. So there's definitely, along the way, there will always be red flags. But I think, again, and what we were actually saying before is that, like, in your gut, you will know when something doesn't feel right. I stayed in fashion as long as I could until I was kind of going to the next step. And now I'm making a documentary, which is literally my world, my people, my camera, my voice. And I've managed to get myself there, because sometimes you do have to do stuff that you don't want to do, and that doesn't ring true to you, or that you need to do to make money. So I wouldn't beat yourself up about it. Notice the flags, notice the things that don't sit with you, so that when you get far enough in your career, you can kind of not like have to do them. But it's a hard career, and I would say this as my like final words to you guys. Creativity is hard. It's really, really hard. It's not an easy road, but it's also the most exciting and the most thrilling and the most sort of giving. And there isn't a day that I don't love what I do. And I think I'm very grateful to wake up and say, I don't hate that I have to do this. This is amazing. This is so fun. And that is a privilege, because actually a lot of people who aren't creatives, or a lot of people that do work 9 to 5s, don't have that privilege. So always see it as fun, and see it as exciting, and seeing it as thrilling. It is hard, but like, the thrill for me, I don't know about you, but the thrill keeps me going. Like, I love it. I love what I do, and I'm so excited to do it. And as long as you can keep that momentum going, all the little red flags and the things that you worry about and things you think about, they will disappear. They will trickle out, and new things will come up. Our careers are not going to be like simple and a straight line. So just know yourself. Do the work on yourself. I said to Jason just before this, like, I have therapy, and I speak to my therapist about all my career stuff all the time, just so I check in on myself as much as I can to be like, oh, is that the right decision to make? Look after yourself, and you'll be able to sort of navigate it, I would say.
Okay. And on that note...
What's your advice on that? What are your red flags?
Basma, come on, we're trying to wrap up.
I want some red flags.
Please remind me of the question again.
What are your red flags from your career?
My red flags for...
Your career.
My career?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I would say it's tough. It's been a journey. I'm getting old. Maybe
would you have stayed making documentaries for as long as you did?
Television, okay, TV was a very different world for me. My journey in television was at a completely different time from you guys. I'm going to make this very quick. I was working at ITV for quite some time, and I was literally one of very few black people in the building. I did endure and go through quite a lot whilst I was there, but it toughened me up. I learned a lot. I wouldn't change it for anything. There was multiple red flags there. There still probably is. But those turned into green flags for me, and it was like character building. So no shade on no institution and no people. We move, we evolve. Just roll with the punches. It's a very tough industry. You need to be thick-skinned, and try not to always lead with emotion. Lead with your ambition and your end goal, and that will pull you through to the very end. That's what I would say.
God, you're really good at these lines.
I mean, I practice. It's been years of work. And on that note, Basma Khalifa, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.